This is the fourth video in the Put Your Breast Foot Forward series. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us again. The topic of this video is pumping and going back to work. There's going to be a lot of information in this video. It's really good and hopefully it will ease your mind a little bit. In this video, I'm going to discuss the basics of pumping and pump parts. Very general overview. Breast milk storage basics, common questions and concerns about going back to work, and introducing a bottle to your baby. First, we're going to start off talking about pumping basics. Okay, so there's generally 3 reasons for you to use a breast pump. The first is to replace a feed, which basically means that baby is taking a bottle and you need to pump to replace that feed. Otherwise, your body thinks that your baby did not need that milk. And as we discussed in the previous video, that could cause your supply to decrease. The second reason is to increase your supply. So that would be you feed baby and then you pump afterwards in addition to what baby eats. That is tricking your body into thinking baby is taking more than they actually are from the breast, and that can increase your supply. You may need to do this if you have an undersupply, but generally you do this under the guidance of a lactation consultant. The third reason is for comfort. So let's say you have an awesome night, baby is still sleeping. Oh my gosh, they almost slept through the night. But you wake up and oh my gosh, your breasts are going to burst. So if baby's still sleeping and you're engorged, or you could also be working on weaning your baby off of the breast and stopping that breastfeeding, but your body's still making milk and you need to decrease that amount. When you pump for comfort, what you do is you only pump until your breasts are comfortable. Otherwise, your body's going to think you're still feeding a baby. So there have been some mornings where my baby slept through the night. They slept really long. I said, I can't wait more time. And I just pumped a little bit just to get that comfort. And like I mentioned before, keep in mind that pumping in addition to feeding a baby can cause an oversupply, and be very, very mindful of this before your supply regulates. Before that regulation that we talked about in the last video, your supply is very, very sensitive to how much milk you're removing from your breasts. So we're gonna just very briefly talk about breast pumps. There are so many different options for breast pumps. There's 3 categories of breast pumps. There's electric, there's manual, and there's the Haka, which is a suction. So the first thing is your electric. I personally have a Spectra, but there's a lot of different brands of electric pumps. There's some that are much smaller and wearable. Let me make this picture larger, like the Spectra S9 you can see, or the Medela Freestyle, Baby Buddha. There's way more pumps on the market than even this picture shows. But I just wanted to show you that there's a lot of options for electric. Manual, I did not include a picture of, but it looks, let me pull this picture up again. That lower left picture, the Spectra S9, you can see the bottles with the flanges, which we're going to talk about in a second. Basically, a manual pump just doesn't have that electric component to it, and you're squeezing with your hand a little lever, and that pumps you. And then there's the Haka, which we will talk a little bit more about. People usually call it a Haka. There's a few different brands. Haka is the original brand, but this is a silicone suction pump. And you might be wondering, how on earth does it even do any pumping? I'll show you in a bit. Typically, your insurance will cover an electric breast pump for you. Usually they have a certain amount or they offer certain brands. What you need to do is you reach out to your insurance company and they give you your options, do a little perusing on the internet, do a little searching, figure out what you need and what, meets your needs. So a haka, I was just talking about this. This is amazing. I remember before I started my baby registry, I had seen this on the internet, and I thought, how on earth does that even work? It's amazing. Let me pull up the picture here. Basically, you invert the flange, which is that top open part. You squeeze out some of the air to get some suction. You place it on your breast. You fold the flange back over your breast, and you let go. And causes suction. It's what in nursing we call bulb suction. It works really well for some women. For some women, it doesn't work great. Basically, it catches your letdown and it's not actively sucking your breast. So it's much more passive. It's much gentler than using like an electric pump to stimulate your baby feeding off of you. However, keep in mind, the haka is removing milk from your breast. And remember what that does is it tells your body that a baby is eating. So even though the haka is maybe not stimulating your breast as much or removing as much milk as, let's say, an electric pump, it does still remove milk and it tells your body to make more. So it can cause an oversupply. So just keep that in mind. Some women hardly get anything off of this. Personally, I could get a couple ounces off of this. So you have to be very careful with how much you're taking off that baby isn't actually eating right then and there in that feed. But it's excellent product. And like I said before, there's too many features about each pump, each brand to discuss in this video. It really depends on what your needs are, but you can do a lot of online research to pick a pump. Breastpumpcomparisons.com has a lot of articles and charts and comparisons that you can do and you can look into. Again, find out what your insurance covers first and then go from there. Now, each brand of pump has slightly different parts of the pump, but one part that every pump has is called the flange. And I've used this word a few times already, and you might be wondering, what on earth is a flange? So a flange, and you can even see it on the haka too, is this opening, this circular opening, and it has, in particular, it's this central circular area, and that is where your nipple goes. Now, flanges are going to be universal. You have to have something that connects with your breast and your nipple. And flange sizing is very important. This is something that I didn't really realize until I was starting to look into breast pumps and things. And a lot of women are not aware of the importance of flange sizing. So as you can see, this image here, you can have too small, correct fit, or too large. It's like Goldilocks. So, and the too small and the too large can cause you a lot of pain and a lot of trouble. So it's really important to make sure that your flanges are sized correctly. Now, you will have flanges that come with your breast pump. So I got the Spectra. I received 24 millimeter flanges and 28 millimeter flanges. These sizes of flange, I'm not sure why the company sends out these sizes. Maybe they are really the average woman's size, but they're notorious for being too big for women. And what will happen then is, as you can see in this picture here, is when you start pumping, your pump will then suck some of your areola into the flange, and that can cause tissue damage, it can cause pain, and it can cause those ducts to block. That, we talked about the ducts, and all those ducts right around that areola nipple area, if those get pulled into the flange, they might actually get blocked and compressed. So it's really important to have the correct fit. Your pump manual, whatever pump you decide to go with, whether it's Spectra or Medela or whatever it is, that manual should have information about how to size for the flanges. The company should also have a website where you can figure out what size flange is appropriate for you. And so I really encourage you to do that. Oftentimes, they will tell you to wait to size your nipple for the flange until after you've had your baby, because the process of having a baby, lots of hormones, can change the size of your nipples. So keep that in mind, and also keep in mind that each breast is different. So you may need 2 different flange sizes, one for each nipple. So again, check out those resources and make sure you get a good flange size, and it's really important. Partners, we didn't forget about you. Something that you can do that really helps moms out when they are pumping is washing and sterilizing their pump parts. You're going to have a lot of different pump parts. I've got a few here. So you've got tubing and this connector. That usually doesn't get washed, but what gets washed is the flange, and you have valves and the bottles that you pump into. It's a lot of parts, and pumping can take a lot of time for women anyways. So something you can do to help moms out is by washing and sterilizing their pump parts. It's a huge help, and I know a lot of women, they rave about their partners when they say, oh, my partner, washes and sterilizes my pump parts. It takes a lot off, our plate, and we really do appreciate that. So I'm going to just cover the basic concepts of pumping. Again, it's going to vary based on what pump you use and your own body and how your letdown happens, to determine how long you're pumping, what suction it's at. But every pump has 2 aspects to it. You have your suction, the level of suction, so how hard is it sucking? And you have your cycle or speed or rate. That is, how frequent is it sucking? Is it sucking once every second? Is it sucking faster than that? So generally, each pump has those 2 options. They might call those different things, but those are the 2, characteristics that we're talking about. And then, of course, there's 2 general phases of pumping. You have your letdown phase. So that's like what we talked about, priming the straw, what baby does when they have those fast, shallow sucks. They're getting that milk flowing. They're telling your breast, okay, I'm feeding, let's get that milk going, I'm hungry. You simulate that. You're simulating baby feeding when you're using a pump. So that letdown phase is priming the straw, short and quick sucks. Usually, you have less suction, but the sucks are happening faster. And then once your milk starts flowing, you start seeing droplets of milk coming out of your nipple, you can change over to an expression phase, which is the milk is flowing, you're going to have longer and stronger sucks, and that is, again, simulating exactly what baby is doing. And that's when you're going to see a lot of the milk come out of your breasts. So with pumping comes giving baby a bottle, which is actually, it can be really exciting. It can be a little bit like bittersweet when you've been just feeding baby at your breast, but it's a great moment for moms. Bottle feeding is not just for moms who are going back to work or working out of the home, I should say. Even stay-at-home moms, or moms that work part-time from home and are around their babies a lot. It's great to be able to give your baby a bottle and, leave the house. Obviously, with COVID, we're not really going anywhere much, but, get out of the house, like socially distance with some friends or something. It's important to have you time, and I cannot stress this enough. Just because you choose to breastfeed does not mean your baby is attached to you at all times. It is not the same thing, and don't let that, a lot of people say that. Don't let that deter you from breastfeeding. You can still have you time. It might be much less than before baby, but you can still do that. And bottle feeding makes it so much easier. Bottle feeding is great. Eventually someone other than you can offer baby the bottle. Now, with that being said, a lot of times someone other than you needs to offer baby the bottle, because breastfed babies figure out that you're the one who has the milk, and they want milk, as I call it, from the tap, straight from the tap. If they know mom is nearby, sometimes they don't want to take a bottle. They like it better straight out of you. So if you are going to give baby a bottle, or you're having issues giving baby a bottle, I should say, try having your partner or another family member or someone give baby a bottle, and you can go somewhere else in the house or even leave the house, go for a walk. The other thing to keep in mind is the size nipple that you get. And I say size, and I really mean the nipple flow. So there's different stages of nipples. A lot of times they have numbers. So you'll have a 1, 2, 3. For Dr. Brown's bottles, I know there's 0 nipple is technically a preemie, but that's what they recommend you start off with breastfed babies. So start off with a slow flow nipple. Basically, that means the milk is exiting that bottle nipple slower, and go from there, because you want the flow from your bottle to be similar to the flow from your breast. Otherwise, baby's gonna feel flooded with milk when they take that bottle. And partners! My husband did say this was okay to share this picture, even though he's not wearing a shirt. You can offer bottles of pumped milk, and this is like so fun and exciting. You can bond with your baby and feed them and give mom a break. She's gonna love you for doing that. And like I mentioned, it might be easier for you to be the one to give baby a bottle. And it's if mom is going back to work and she's pumping for that reason, baby needs to get used to taking a bottle before they head to daycare or someone else is taking care of them and watching them. So, you're part of that process, and you're really important to getting that process going. So it can be really enjoyable to be able to feed your baby too. Now, something you may hear is nipple confusion. Is that fact or fiction? Now, a lot of people say, don't give newborns a bottle, it's going to cause nipple confusion. Lots of moms end up being very worried about this. There's not a lot of evidence that nipple confusion actually happens. What can happen is something called nipple or bottle preference. Now, this simply happens when it's easier for baby to feed from a bottle than from the breast, because the flow may be faster from the bottle. So keep in mind, that's why we want to try with a slower flow nipple and work up from there. If baby gets used to how fast the milk comes out of a bottle, and then they go to your breast and it doesn't come out as quickly and they have to work harder for it, they're going to get frustrated and they're just going to say, give me the bottle. It's much easier. So don't fret. There are ways to avoid this. The first way is to wait to give a bottle until breastfeeding is well established. What does that mean? It means you're in a groove, you're in your rhythm, your supply is regulated, and you're not having those issues or needing that much attention like you do in those first 2 weeks with a newborn. So once your breastfeeding is well established, you're comfortable with breastfeeding, waiting to introduce a bottle till then is a good way to avoid this nipple preference. The other way, like we mentioned, is to start off with a slower flow nipple. And as baby gets older and more efficient at sucking, you may notice that they get really frustrated with the bottle, and then you can try going up a size in the bottle nipple too. It's kind of trial and error with these kiddos. So what do you do with this breast milk after you pump it? I just wanted to give you the basic storage basics. Just remember 4 hours, 4 days, 12 months. So you can leave, when you pump milk, freshly expressed breast milk that's never been in the fridge, you can leave out for 4 hours at room temperature. And that's immediately after pumping. Again, hasn't been in the fridge or reheated. That's really nice, because sometimes you pump and you will leave a bottle of milk somewhere and you'll come back to it 2 hours later and say, oh no, is it bad? No, it's good for 4 hours. As long as your house is a normal temperature, it's not super hot and muggy in the summer or something like that. You can leave freshly expressed milk in the fridge. Once it goes in the fridge, it's got to stay there. You can leave it in there for 4 days. So that's your time window from putting it in the fridge and then saying, okay, I need to put this in the freezer, or we need to use it and give it to baby. Then once you put milk in the freezer, it is good up to 12 months in the freezer. After that, it doesn't necessarily go bad, but the beneficial properties start to decrease. There starts to be some decomposition of the elements of the breast milk. So it is good in the freezer up to 12 months. it's best up to 6 months, but the CDC does say up to 12 months is acceptable, is the word that they use. Now, I want to make a note that the advice used to be different from the CDC about freezers. They used to distinguish between upright freezers, the ones where it's half fridge, half freezer, you're opening the freezer, you're getting your frozen pizza out, and a deep freezer. And a deep freezer is like a chest freezer that is colder and you leave it closed for longer. They used to distinguish their advice for how long breast milk is good for in the freezer between those two items. They do not anymore. They say up to 6 months is best, 12 months is acceptable. Now, once you have fed a bottle of breast milk to a baby, you need to use it within 2 hours of baby finishing that feeding. And you cannot refreeze milk that has been thoroughly thawed. So once it's thawed, got to use it, and you have to use thawed milk within 24 hours. So I know that's a lot of stipulations and numbers that I just threw at you. Best place to look is the CDC website. Just Google CDC breast milk storage. They have charts and guidelines and pictures and great things. Check it out. It's very, very helpful. Now, the infamous freezer stash. We're talking about freezing milk. You hear about these women. Let me make this picture bigger. Whoa, that's a lot of milk. You see these pictures and you're like, oh my gosh, do I need to do that? And the answer is no, it's totally not necessary. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, this woman's freezer is probably from a woman who had an oversupply or hyperlactation, and she was the milk just kept coming. There's nothing wrong with that. But keep in mind, before going back to work, you really only need enough milk to get baby through that first day, because while you're at work and baby is feeding and taking their bottles, you're pumping. So the bottles you pump will be used the next day to replace those feeds. So you really only need a day or two. It's nice to have, a little bit of extra milk on hand in case, something crazy happens and someone else needs to feed the baby. But really, you don't need a freezer stash like this. And the other thing I want to show you really quick is this is something that's been really helpful for me. So what I do is when I store frozen milk, I put it in gallon bags like this. And what you can do is when you freeze milk, put it on something flat in the freezer so the bag freezes flat. Then what you do is you can fit all of your milk into a gallon Ziploc, zip it up, put the dates, put how much is in there, and put it in your freezer. It will save you a lot of freezer space. And that's all about that. Something else that women sometimes experience is something called high lipase. You may notice, particularly after you thaw frozen breast milk, you may notice it has a strange metallic or soapy smell. You'll know it when you smell it. That is high lipase. And basically, what is lipase? It helps break down fat in milk. So if your milk has high lipase, it may give off this strange smell. That does not mean it's bad. It has not gone bad. Do not worry. But some babies are more picky about taste of their milk. Some babies take it totally fine. You would never know. Some babies are a little more picky, and if they taste that milk, they may not care for it as much. If you discover this and you have some ounces frozen in the freezer and you're like, oh no, my baby doesn't want to take this, it tastes bad, I have to get rid of all the milk. No, you don't. What you can do is you can mix that thawed frozen breast milk that has high lipase, you can mix it with fresh, and that will usually help alleviate that issue, and baby will be more likely to take it. And then in the future, what you can do is something called scalding your milk. You'll have to look that up. I'm not going to go into all the particulars about it, but if you scald your milk before you freeze it, that can help that lipase breakdown process. So let's talk about going back to work and your rights in the workplace. Pumping mothers are protected in the workplace. They you can't be discriminated against because you're pumping and breastfeeding. Laws do vary by state, but most states require that employers ensure mothers have time and an appropriate hygienic space to pump. Pumping in a bathroom is not okay. That is not hygienic. For some reason, people think that's an appropriate place to pump, and it's not. It's gross. Do you want bathroom germs getting into your baby's milk? No, you do not. So check out your state laws. Do a quick Google search, and they do vary by state about how specific they are. And keep in mind what the state laws are when you have to deal with going back to work and getting your pump break time. I'll also say that some states designate that those laws only apply to you the first year after a baby is born, up to your baby's first birthday. But like I said, look them up, see what your state says, and go with that. Now, I know it can be kind of awkward when you have to bring up the fact that you need to pump to your boss. If you have a male boss or, any boss really, sometimes that might feel awkward. I find that it's best to have the pumping conversation, the pump break conversation, when you're talking about maternity leave before you even have your baby. Because you're going to have that maternity leave conversation, and you're going to be discussing, who takes over your duties, how long you're off, when you're going to leave, when you're going to return. When you're hashing out all those details, just tell your boss, hey, listen, my plan is to breastfeed my baby because of all the benefits for my baby and the benefits for me. It's the healthiest choice for them, yada, yada, yada. And just say, I just wanted to let you know now that when I return from my maternity leave that I will need to have pump breaks to pump and do that. So you might not know before you go on maternity leave how frequently you'll need to pump, how long it will take you. Tell them, as soon as I kind of know and get a feel for how long it's going to take me, I'll let you know. But just mention that beforehand so they don't feel blindsided when you're coming back from maternity leave. Oh yeah, by the way, I need breaks to pump. That also gives them time to figure out a space for you to pump. Sometimes it's harder when you work for a smaller company or you work in a small office. You might have to get creative with having a private place to pump. But give them that time, give them that notice ahead of time so they have the time while you're out to at least think about where you're going to go. And of course, if you unfortunately encounter resistance, provide them copies of state laws for pumping and advocate for yourself. And again, just include that it is a recommendation by pediatricians to breastfeed your baby for the first year. It's not just a lifestyle choice. It's not something that you're doing because, you're a crunchy granola mom or anything. It's a health choice. And give them those facts that I gave you in that first video. And to be honest, I think sometimes employers really surprise people by how open and encouraging they can be. Also, returning to work and through all this process, it can be really emotionally taxing. You can have a lot of different emotions with returning to work. It can be, just very emotional for women. Something to keep in mind is that it's okay to have a full range of emotions. You're not a bad mom for being excited to go back to work and having a break from your baby. And you're not a terrible mom for going back to work. As moms, we have a lot of different facets. We're not just mom. We're, also employees or business owners or, whatever we're doing. So it's okay, whatever emotions you're feeling about this step, it's fine. It's all right to feel that. Partners, this is where you come in. Offer mom moral support when returning to work. And, sending baby to daycare that first day is really terrible. A lot of moms cry all day about it. I'm not going to say all day, but I know I cried in the car after we dropped my son off for the first time. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm leaving him for the first time since he was in me. That's okay. And partners, just be supportive. just, give kind, encouraging words. Mom may drop baby off at daycare and be like, yes, finally have some time alone. That's okay too. Just make her feel validated. And usually after the first couple days or the first week, get back in that routine, it gets a lot easier. So that's all for the video. I told you it was going to be a hefty video. That's what it was. So, but that's all for that video. The next video, our last video, video 5, is going to be common breastfeeding issues, and that is coming up next. And again, please remember to fill out the survey in the description of the YouTube video. It is in the description below. And we'll see you next time.